Welcome to the Self-Defense Warrior Podcast, where our hosts, Militich, probe the minds of experts from a vast spectrum of knowledge on how to best prepare for the inevitable emergency situation to come. Jeffrey and Pat in the Self-Defense Warrior Podcast are your insurance policy moving forward. And now, here they are, the hosts of the Self-Defense Warrior Podcast, Jeffrey Wilson and Pat Militich.
All right, Jeffrey and I are joining you again for another episode of the Self-Defense Warrior. Jeffrey, how are you today?
I'm good this fine morning. Usually don't do a show this early, so I got the sun like light right here. Ooh, there it is, coming through strong, coming out of the cloud. Doing good though, man. Excuse me, doing good.
So we're doing an episode just you and I today. We had a huge, massive interview scheduled for this morning, and I don't know. Do we even say who it is? I think we can hold off on that.
I think we've dropped some. I think. Okay, whatever.
It's up. Hey, I'm not a dictator over here, bro. What do you want to do?
No, I mean we've spoken about it. Our former guest Boone Cutler said he had written a book called The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generational Warfare, and he was going to be, who was the co-author of the book, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, on for an episode to follow up, and we've had to shuffle that around twice now. I mean, as you can imagine, the schedule is pretty hectic, I'm sure, but yeah, he had something come up at the last minute this morning, but we have rescheduled for, I believe, tomorrow morning. So we're going to get and Lieutenant General Michael Flynn on tomorrow morning, chop it up about their book.
Yeah, and I've been reading the book, and I tell you what, it's stuff that we've been talking about for a long time. You know, what we have termed asymmetrical warfare, but there's a lot of different types, and they're going to break all of that down for us, for our guests, and help people understand what's going on today and all the different tools of warfare that are being used today on citizens. So it's going to be a really, really very enlightening conversation, to say the least. And so I'm looking forward to getting the news out there to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's a subject I've been kind of interested in for a very, very long time, because it's so, with symmetrical warfare, kinetic warfare, you see your enemy right in front of you. They're easily discernible. But when you start getting into the different aspects of fifth generational nonlinear asymmetrical warfare, some of the most effective stuff is when you don't even realize it's happening to you. And ways they've been doing it, whether it's biological, chemical, propaganda, covert action, etc., it's happening right under your nose, but you don't realize it's happening. So people wonder, like, hey, we've been in this war with this country, or this war with this country. And like, I would say, depending on the scenario, yes, because these tactics have been implemented for a very long time. So I'll be anxious to talk to him about it.
When we first started going into the Middle East, Gulf War, and a lot of the stuff that was going on then, and as things moved forward, the physical terrorism, not the other types of terrorism, the cyber terrorism, chemical terrorism, biological, all that, but more the physical terrorism. Nobody's wearing uniforms, so that was kind of a part of that. And the Mujahideen, which we funded, against Russia, they dealt with that as well when they were there. And so you didn't know who was who, and all the way back to Vietnam as well, right? The North Vietnamese would blend in. You didn't know who was who. There's no uniforms. You can't tell, and it's not the Packers versus the Vikings anymore. You just don't know who's playing.
No, exactly. I mean, I think, modern warfare is executed in a way because they understand, kinetic warfare. I mean, a lot of bloodshed and bombs and bullets, man. It's bad PR. But if you could still change hearts and minds, as opposed to, burying people, hey, you're saving on batteries and munitions, etc. But I mean, I think ultimately you want to be changing hearts and minds, as opposed to this, conversion by fear, if you will. Right. Fear-based trauma.
Yeah, I rewind back to when all of this stuff was starting. I was looking at the timeline for COVID and all of it, and the beginnings in Wuhan, and the news coming out, and the broadcast showing Chinese people convulsing in beds, and all the crazy stuff that was going on over there. And you and I were already talking, going, "Oh, here we go, man, here we go." And I really, really overestimated how many Americans there were out there that were aware of, what this was going to be all about. I mean, I completely overestimated the American public.
again, man, fear's been such a powerful long. What do you want to kill your grandma or grandpa? Kill her, Pat. I mean, they go out, and now it's when at first it was no, they're not. This is really going to mess with your kids. It became like you got to have your kids vaccinated. I mean, it was next level. I mean, and we're still seeing the ripple effects of it. China supposedly has some mutant variant busting out of. I mean, they still haven't 100% let it go because I think, like you said, their tactic was so effective, man. I mean, it was. Their plan definitely worked on a lot of people. I still see people. I mean, and whatever, to each his own. Do what you want to do. I still see people wearing the little cloth mask.
I mean, not acceptable.
Listen,
it's not acceptable. It's just not acceptable.
That's the part about freedom, Patrick. Hey, they're not hurting anybody. Look, that's the definition of freedom. Sometimes having shit go down that you don't like.
I get it.
I'm just saying from the standpoint of I'm not going to force you to wear it or not to wear it. You're not hurting anybody.
No. Right. No, I get that.
That's all I mean. That's all.
Yeah. But I'm just, the hoping and praying that Americans will ascend to a different level of understanding of what's going on around them. And I saw a good friend, one of my good buddies, older brothers, and he's got a huge beard and he's wearing a mask, and I see him in a grocery store and he gives me a hug, and I kind of whisper in his ear, I'm like, what's going on, bro? What's going on? And I start to talk to him and I go, you got to have that. I just think about it, the exchange in with the oxygen, out with the carbon dioxide, the proper expelling of waste. That's don't inhibit that, because it's not going to help your respiratory system. And he goes, wow. He goes, I didn't even think of it like that. And he took his mask off, So I just want to see people express their freedom. And it's like the mask represents almost a jail cell following them, or they're encased into how I look at it anyway.
Well, I mean, not to get too corny about it, but Bob Marley, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds, redemption song. And that's ultimately what your boy had. I mean, it was fear that had him doing that. He didn't even think through the real with something so inhaling oxygen, exhaling carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide being poison, whatever. And like you said, compromising your respiratory system. He didn't even think about it like that. He's trying to save his life and everyone else's life. Even when, I mean, whatever, not to get too deep down this, but when Fauci on 60 Minutes, when it just started, it was like, yeah, the masks aren't going to do anything. I mean, I don't know about the N95s, but the ones everyone was wearing, the cloth ones, he was like, these are useless. But, again, it's monkey see, monkey do. And, you don't want to be somebody who's not behaving like the rest of the group, like the freaking Dr. Seuss. Remember the Sneetches story? The cool Sneetches had the star in their bellies, and the one who didn't were like ostracized from society. I digress, though.
And I forget the researcher's name, but he did a study that only 20% of humans are capable of a level of maybe comprehension to not follow an order or a mandate or whatever that is completely just illegal, makes no sense, whatever. If it comes from a perceived authority figure, only 20% are able to go, yeah, no, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm not going to do it. So, that's a much smaller number than I thought, Jeff. A much smaller number.
Really? Well, and I always, you got to anticipate the numbers, for every, for the yin yang, you can't have the high without the low. I mean, there's going to be people who just aren't going to get it. Just as there's going to be that percentage of.
That's a lopsided yin to the yang, bro. A lot more than the other, right?
Yeah, no, I get it. You would like to see a little bit more imbalance, but I mean, you're going to anticipate it. And it's like, my thing is, not that I was ever really trying to save anybody, but I mean, it's just, do you, man? But my thing is like, leave my kids alone. Make these restrictions and these forcibly injecting or mandating masks or losing your job and your freaking livelihood. I mean, next level shit, or your business. That was absolutely insanity.
Yeah, and that's the thing that people who are very well educated, doctors, lawyers, scientists, business owners, people who have a lot of intelligence, quite frankly, not understanding how this was going to tie to our economy and then to the monetary system and then to freedom in general and everything else, where you and I just went, wait, we saw right down that train headed immediately. And we're talking about this and saying, Well, if you close your business and everybody does that, the economy collapses eventually. And then we see the common sense, the lack of common sense, and people allowing the trillions of dollars to be printed and to, start this cascade of inflation and job loss and business closings and, all the other stuff that has transpired. And then
supply chain issues.
Then people taking money and sitting home and businesses not being able to hire people. The workforce is decimated. Every law enforcement agency across the country, besides, I think, sheriff's departments, which are, low on manpower as well. But the numbers in cities for police, it's like they're not even going to show up. They're not even going to show up hardly.
I mean,
and that's so. All of this is just
playbook. Yeah. If there was a playbook for how to implode a civilization or a society, we're checking off a lot of the boxes, man. Then you enter in.
The thing. That's it. If you wanted to destroy civilization, what would you be doing differently right now?
That's exactly. Well, and then the part of the equation of the freaking sea of illegals crossing the southern border. I mean, just next level numbers that are being put up right now.
Well, and that's where you have to. But that's not even the problem, to be honest with you. It's the individuals that are, scattered throughout those crowds that are coming here for a certain reason, and it's not a good reason, right? So we've seen, they were wondering how all these wheat fields were catching on fire, right? Wondering how all the wheat fields are catching, forest fires starting and all kinds of other stuff. And that was, most likely, agriculture terrorism and a lot of other stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it is the problem, but it is definitely a spoke on the wheel of what we're seeing as far as the destruction of. I mean, and we're about to see it because we are seeing it. They're going to flood them in here, give them free shit, and guess who they're going to vote for? Till it gets. I mean, they're in the numbers they're putting up.
Doesn't matter who. There's no legitimate votes anymore anyway, except at the local level, probably. To be honest with you,
but to yes, and even there, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But I mean, this is, like I said, if you were to have a playbook or a checklist on how to implode a society, like you said, what would you do differently? And it's a slow drip. It's nothing that happens overnight. But going back to even ideological, dude, we're in freaking trouble. So let's touch on some of these articles we got here, brother.
Yeah,
you had a couple in mind, didn't you?
I think. You go ahead with our friend from Israel that, at one point they were talking about trying him and putting him in prison. What happened to that, Jeff?
I mean, that's happened multiple times. Bibi's back, baby. Bibi is forming a new government in Israel and is back in the saddle. I mean, that dude has been around forever. Back in the freaking Shimon Peres, Yitzhak Rabin days. Since probably longer than 90s, but when I started paying attention to this stuff was probably the early 90s, and he's been around for a long time. Like not only just a politician in Israel, he's been like the top, prime minister or some iteration of that. He's been a top dog over there for a hot minute. He's been in a lot of legal trouble. It's kind of weird.
It's like watching. It's the same thing here as in every country. It seems like the major Western and developed nations around the world, with political leaders and the fights and the left and the right and the constant, just keeping the citizens watching the tennis ball go back and forth, right? It's just keep the ball in the air, man. Just keep the ball bouncing and let the crowds, let the villagers, constantly wonder, never be on sound footing, always wondering what's going on, confused, fighting back and forth. And so, with Netanyahu, I don't even remember the original charges. Was it a financial deal? I can't remember now.
Some kind of fraud, I believe.
Yeah,
I forget what it was. I forget specifically, but it's been multiple things like over the years. It's kind of, but no. What's interesting is something I was watching on this cat named Vladislav Surkov, who used to work for Putin, younger dude. said something about asymmetrical, nonlinear warfare. He's like, the purpose of asymmetrical warfare is not to win the war, but to keep you in such a state where you're like always never having a clue what's going on. I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Right.
Keeping you in that constant kind of fight or flight, never really knowing. Yeah. Yes. So
well,
I mean, that's a huge part of it.
That's the thing that, to ignore history and how these processes have worked throughout history, the Bolsheviks, the Mensheviks, all of it, where the folks, and I want people to listen to this really carefully and understand that if you are siding with what's going on in terms of, because you perceive the party that's in power aligns with your beliefs, and it's okay then to abuse the other half of the citizenry is truly in power, which they're pretty much, it's that way right now in the United States. Once they accomplish their goals, well, you thought they were your friends. You thought they aligned with you. You now are not a tool anymore. You don't serve a purpose anymore, and they will gladly get rid of you. They will gladly get rid of you.
Without a doubt.
Because they at least respect people that will push back, right? They at least will respect that you are aware, you're seeing what's going on and not falling for it. But the people that are being used, the useful idiots, are seen as literally less than cockroaches. That's how they look at people.
You just said it. I mean, they look at them as useful idiots. And if that recent omnibus bill that just got passed by doesn't let people know on both ways, shape, or form, I'm not sure what will. Because when you start going down the rabbit hole and what was, defense contract, I have nothing against the military defense, but I mean, you're talking big dollars towards the military industrial complex. You're talking about, I think it was like 15, 16 earmarks, pet projects for these cats. I mean, you talk about a huge transfer of wealth, man. That's what that was. And it was legal. They voted on it. Nothing surreptitious about it.
That's the thing is, when $1.7 trillion can just get thrown out there with keystrokes on a computer, one has to ask, they don't need our tax dollars. They don't even need them.
No.
They can just fabricate it out of thin air, right?
Yeah. That's what they do anyway. Fractional banking.
And we look at 45 billion more going to the Ukraine. They're now flaunting it in our faces and just saying, we're giving this money to a bunch of it back to us, to the trust funds or the nonprofits, right? The foundations, so to speak, right? And it's everybody's aware of it. Everybody's aware of it. Why is it? Why are Americans not raising hell, right?
That's why people talk about bizarro world. It's just like the reality's just been inverted. Like when the summer when everything was allowed to be burned down and looted and shit, we're like, whoa, the normal world, if you try to knock over a grocery store or a convenience store, you got like SWAT teams and frogmen and freaking coming from the helicopters coming after you. But for whatever reason, that summer, they just had carte blanche to get as freaking nasty as possible.
Right. No, it's
again another deal of how you corrode and implode a society. Let down because, of course, the Hegelian dialectic, they want to bring order to the chaos they created, but that's further down the line.
Well, and I think about this, so, law enforcement agencies, they're decimated, right? Their numbers are down. At what point do they start, because here in Scott County, they were talking about if they get to a certain level of, where the county sheriff's department or any county sheriff's department across the country gets to where the manpower is down too low, where they start going, hey, we're going to call up this dude who's got some military experience. Hey, we're going to deputize you. You're now deputized. Here's a paycheck, right? And does it get to that point? But then you have to ask yourself, say the only law enforcement experience I have is training law enforcement, right? The only military experience I have is training them. I've done ride-alongs. That doesn't qualify me. But if they called me, would I take that job? Considering what's coming and what they're going to expect law enforcement to do to people. right?
I mean, it would have to be some of that OTJ, man, or on the job training, or I'm sorry, acronym would be on the job OTJ. Yeah. So I mean, most people would line up with you, and it would have to be, learning as you go. Because I mean, once it gets to that point, it's like if cats like you or people who were asked to be deputized refuse. I mean, that's last line of defense before it gets full on freaking Thunderdome. I mean, because if it's completely lawless,
I love it.
If it gets to that point, completely lawless, then there is no, whether citizen, militia, army, or whatever protecting. I mean, it's Thunderdome. But maybe
So I saw a veteran that he posted on Instagram, and he said, I pray to God that I don't have to go back into, defending my against my fellow citizens, for God's sakes, right? I mean, that's the last thing anybody wants. But then he started talking about, he said, ultimately, that if people are so programmed and their minds are weaponized against their fellow Americans, and you have to defend yourself, you have no choice at that point, right? You're not, we're, as you say, sounding the horns of Gundar to our fellow Americans, saying, stop being programmed. Don't fight your neighbor. Don't hate your neighbor. Recognize who the problem is. And, when I did a interview across the river with a local, they interviewed me, and one of the last things they had me, of me saying was, Americans need to recognize who their enemy is. Americans, and I was saying, your neighbor's not your enemy. You need to recognize who the enemy is. And when they posted that on their Facebook page, people were going, oh yeah, terrorist, domestic terrorist, oh yeah, racist, so, all the stuff that was falsely written about me, and then saying, who do you think he's talking about, who the enemy is? And none of them had a clue. None of them had a clue that we're being divided by very powerful entities, and that these people are just completely unaware. That's the only thing that I'm afraid of, Jeff, is that these people simply are so unaware that they will just literally march right off a cliff. They will march directly off a cliff.
We see it. We see it all the time. When we used to do the farm, we're living in a world where people will trample another human being for sales, Black Friday sales on TVs and whatever stuff. Like, yeah, it's bad. And, part of the engineering this many times, and hope to God it never gets to this. I mean, these are the stages of genocide when you start turning on your neighbor in the way that we've been seeing over the last, not only just neighbors, but family members. Marriages have ended, friendships have ended based off of political disagreements, which, in my opinion, is definitely by design, where you no longer see someone as a human being, you're the other team in that steady Pepsi challenge binary dialectic of either or. And it's not by accident, dude. I mean, this is what social engineering has done to us. The behavioral scientists, the social engineers, they know who we are, and they know how to, divide and conquer when you can divide and control. And it's so effective. And like I said, I don't think you're ever going to save everybody, but I would like to see the numbers. I mean, we're living in a world where, like, a mother could go to a student, whatever, the school board meeting, speak out defending her child, and somehow be labeled somehow a threat, a domestic terrorist, as they call them. I mean, that's the inversion of reality right there.
Right. Well, and with a lot of marriages, it's interesting with a lot of the marriages. I've talked to people who have also, had their marriage split apart during all of this stuff, and it is, for years before any of this stuff, I was already trying to almost backing out of the system, right? And it all started when I healed my own respiratory system through organics, and things you start to recognize that the system isn't here to benefit you. None of these systems that have been put in place, educational systems, a lot of this stuff. And that's not saying there's not a lot of good people in those.
For sure.
There's a lot of great teachers out there. There's a lot of great doctors. There's a lot of all of it, right? People that actually care.
The system.
yeah, it's the system that causes the problem. So, and then when the COVID thing hit, it sped everything up, where people were just pulling apart families, not allowing people to come over for Christmas and all this other bullshit, out of fear and everything. And there's just a certain percentage of society that is just trying as hard as they can to just pull themselves and remove themselves from all of these different types of systems. And it's a very interesting observation to look at the things that I've seen, and having, again, conversations with people who have, split from their spouse and stuff, which is, because of a lot of the stuff where one spouse is going, and it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. And it's happening more than I think people realize. But I mean, that's, again,
yeah,
it's messed up.
Yeah, and
it is.
Yeah.
It is what it. But it's.
Well, it was, I fought like a machine for as long as I could, win a world title, train a bunch of guys. I'm full steam ahead, broadcasting, doing all this stuff, and I'm just running on a hamster wheel, just grinding for what I perceived eventually to be, dude, literally gardening. I wanted to garden. I wanted to fish. I wanted to hunt. That's what I was seeing in the future. And that wasn't the plan, Jeff. that wasn't the plan, on the other side of the other side. And because I just wanted something nice out in the country, a pond out back, a pole building where I could do cool stuff in, train, do stuff like that. And that wasn't the plan, brother. That wasn't the plan at all.
Well, no, but like I've said to you, you're exactly where you are at exactly the right time. The show ain't over yet, brother. You know that.
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's why we keep doing what we're doing. And, that's really what it comes down to. So, but, what's some more headlines you want to talk about? What's some things that are going on?
Dude, I watched this documentary. I think it was Joe Rogan. And I had heard about this story about cobalt mines and how they're mined, but this cat named Siddharth Kara, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, sir, but yeah, he wrote a book. I forget the name of the down, but it's like blood, cobalt, something. Anyway, he went to Eastern Congo or Western part of the Congo, where Congo was like the only, not the only place, but 90% of our cobalt is mined from the Congo. And he was just talking about the condition, so ridiculous. He's talking about thousands and thousands of people just in these mines digging with their hands, no protective equipment. People are just dying from cancers and babies or birth defects. These kids are having kids strapped to their back. And parents are bringing kids to work in these mines. Like I said, it's so not regulated. So it's like these holes they're digging, the mine collapsing, and like 30, 40 kids are dying.
You've been listening to the Self-Defense Warrior Podcast with Jeffrey Wilson and Pat Miletich. Watch the complete interview on Red Voice Media Premium using the link below, completely uncensored and ad-free. Not a member yet? Try it for $1.